Okay, welcome back from our lunch break slash documentary break slash if you were out in the lobby a little bit ago, you got to make some cool films, see them run through a projector. That was very fun. We're back right now with a panel on diversity and representation in the media here at Grand Rapids Public Library's Media Literacy Summit. If you're just jumping in, we had a really cool morning talking about news deserts, what that means for the local fabric, civic engagement. We had a great keynote speech about media literacy, obviously really important stuff, and we're going to keep talking about really important things right now. We have on this panel right here, Tommy Allen, Rapid Growth Media Lifestyle Editor, who's going to be moderating the discussion. We also have publisher. And he is publisher too, so definitely make sure to update your programs and respond accordingly. We also have Kylie Ambu, who is the inclusion reporter with WGVU Public Media, and Victor Williams, MiFi CEO. So I'll turn it over to them. Please welcome our moderator and panelists. We're going to have a great discussion.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody who came out today. I know that it's probably garden day for a lot of people in Grand Rapids. I was at a pancake breakfast before this, and then I raced home to do some gardening real quick, and so a little dirt on the nails I was cleaning as I was getting back to here with everybody today. So thank you for coming out. As you already heard, Kylie Ambu is with us today. She's an award-winning Asian American journalist who has spent the past 5 years reporting in West Michigan. We're so glad you're here. She currently works as an inclusion reporter and host for WGVU Public Media. And they are focusing on the station on stories surrounding historically underrepresented communities. And I'm understanding this is your area that the beat, as they say, probably, the beat. Her work can be found on WGVU's local PBR, whoops, hello, NPR station on the PBS affiliate program, Mutually Inclusive. So we're very happy you're here, Kylie. Victor Williams, boy, you got a bio here, but there's others that you've left out. The governor's, no, I looked for the governor's slug wall. I couldn't find it anywhere in here. Victor and I go way, way back. He goes further back in Grand Rapids, not by age, but just that I moved here from Flint. But Victor has been born and bred in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm reading it from the bio here. Victor Williams is a native son who has been around the world and back, and that is true if you know Victor. He is a natural-born creative through poetry and rap. He found his way as a teen into the music business and established himself as a pioneer in the music of Michigan's hip-hop community. So, and I know it's more than music, it's everything. It's a culture. Thank you. Victor has worked with both major and independent labels. He founded the Grand Rapids Hip Hop Coalition. That's where we met. And as an organization, it was designed to support and advise budding local talent. The Love Movement Incorporated, it's a hip-hop non-for-profit that he founded that focuses on preservation through youth education and hip-hop arts and culture. Passionate about his city, Victor has demonstrated his leadership skills in many successful arenas, from politics to civic engagement, and we definitely have seen that over the years. But always has wanted to create institutions that would feed the need of young creatives on the southeast side of town where he grew up. So in 2018, he co-created Grandstand Pictures, and again, Grand Rapids, Michigan Film. Thank you. So we're going to try not to use any gatekeeping, letters here. We're going to try to say them. So again, that's Grand Rapids Media Initiative and Film. What's the last? Incubator. Great, we got it. So. Grandstand Pictures is a production company specifically organized to tell the stories from Grand Rapids, and the GRMIFI is also looking to train BIPOC community members that are creatives, and again, Black, Indigenous, people of color, so we don't gatekeep, creatives in all aspects of film and video and media. So thank you, Victor, for being here. We're so happy to have you here. Round of applause for our panelists. As we said earlier, I'm the publisher at Rapid Growth Media. I'm of a certain age now where it's weird to be in media still with all the changes that have happened, because I didn't think I would stick around this long in media doing the work, but I really do enjoy this moment that we're having in our culture to tell stories finally that I think a lot of us have waited our whole lives for. So that's a part of it, is like just being able to tell things now that we haven't been able to talk about. it's a great place for us to be. I want to first, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors right up front to say thank you, Grand Rapids Public Foundation, Library Foundation, as well as Community Media Centers, GRTV, and Wealthy Theater. Thank you all for making this possible. So we find ourselves in a unique time in history, right as we have all the tools that we could possibly need as creative people to make things happen. We're watching a collapse of media happen all over the country, but also all over the world. And so nobody feels it more than those of us who work in, say, media, in traditional media as it relates to, say, news, journalism. But we know that today this conversation is going to be so much more than just that, because media has become more than that now, and the opportunities continue to grow. But we do know that as we look at the percentage of journalists who are minorities, and I'm just going to speak from the journalism lens here, because when we started this, that's kind of where my head went, that in 2019, only 29%, or 21.9%, of salary workforce in journalism identified as people of color, with only 6.56%, and it's pretty precise here, I'm reading the stats, identifying as Black. So as we look at that one, we'll move into the other aspect of this, some facts I want to go over before we begin our conversation. Diversity as a whole, though, includes far more than just gender, sexual orientation, race, age, or disability. It is intersectional, and I think for a lot of us on stage, we will intersect with a lot of different groups and identities as well throughout this. It's not that we're here to expose them all to you, but I think it's important to say that we are often more than one thing, and we can bring more things to the table as people who work in media. And so I'm really proud of this group that we have today, because you all act in some ways as disruptors of industry or of standards that we've had for so long, by just being able to show up and do your jobs and make a contribution. So I want to thank everyone here who does journalism work or any kind of media work that is disrupting, because if you look at where we've come from being places that tools were often the reason you didn't get access to any kind of like media work. So if you didn't know how to edit on Avid, and Avid was quite expensive in the 90s, it was like a $30,000 program. If we didn't have places like Apple disrupting and democratizing tools, I don't think we get to this moment we have today. So a big part of this has been the availability of tools that we have for all of us. And so as we're setting this up today, I'd like to kind of just share a few short stories that I think really kind of point to how things have changed. I'd be remiss if I did not give credit to Conrad Bacher, who was a professor at Calvin University, and he was in the art department. And it was around the time the internet in the late 90s was really starting to take hold of what was possible. And he said, we need to be prepared for the future that artists, and again, he's going to speak from where he is, but he said artists are going to be able to take more control of their lives and make sure that their work is seen. And I think that's pretty much been what has been the experience for all of us as we look at the landscape of media as we go forward. I also think it's important that when we have our conversation today, that we'll try to frame language. If we use any kind of gatekeeping acronyms or anything, please hold us accountable, because it's very easy when we get into the banter that it can just easily flow out. I just asked my panelists, too, that we just kind of bring people in so they're not like looking on their phones like, what was that? So we want to keep people present. So I want to welcome my panelists and just say, as we start today, I think the first place to start really is, what is media diversity as we look at what we have before us now?
All right. I think I looked up because I knew that was going to be a question, and because it's a definition, I was like, okay, let me look up all the different options. And to be honest, I didn't really like the options that I found online, because like you said, diversity goes far beyond, gender, sexual orientation, race. It can be any sort of identity that, creates a difference in the world. And so for me, I think media diversity is just the intentional, accurate, and nuanced reporting and storytelling of the diverse population in this world. I know that's very general, but I think to categorize things, you leave people out. And that's the whole point of media diversity, is to cover as vast amount of communities as you can.
Absolutely. Victor?
I agree with that. Diversity is such a broad word. It's
Right.
like, do we know the ends of it? I think we still have a long way to go with that, you know. So as I say here, as a hip hop cultural specialist, I think about the ways in which hip hop is portrayed throughout media, and I still don't have a hard time seeing myself in a lot of it. And so, you know, this goes back to what you were saying earlier about just, you know, Apple breaking through and creating ways for different pathways for different creators to have access to different mediums. We still now get caught up in the algorithms, right? So, you know, a lot of people ask me all the time, why don't you do a podcast to make sure your voice is heard, right? Why don't you do some, you know, but we still have to figure out a way to break through the algorithms to make sure that our voice and perspective is heard, because it's too easy to get swallowed up in all of the money, right?
Absolutely.
The money that's out there that's paying for control of the algorithms.
That's a really good point there, I think, about the algorithms. I think that's worth spending just a moment on, is that, you know, you can produce content, but you're at the mercy of often platforms who now, I mean, a lot of us have, I don't know how many people have come through the whole digital wave of social media. I would say around, you know, I think it begins probably with Facebook in college, but that wasn't available to the general public till later, about 2007, I think, if I remember correctly, when they make it available to the whole public. But at that moment, we see this kind of, we're moving out of Friendster. I know I'm aging myself here. MySpace, hello, Tom. If you're still out there, come back. We miss you. Again, a MySpace joke. But we go through all those platforms, which were the early ones, to kind of get into this behemoth that we have now, which is this massive corporate machine that you must pay. And I know from a person who runs a magazine where we want to get our content out there, we might have a good audience, but if I want to reach my audience, I have to raise money to pay Facebook to make sure we can get to them. So I've been a big believer in, like, as we've watched the monetization of social media, and that if we want to reach our people, as you know, we grow our audiences and everything like that, I'm a big person that believes you got to control your list. And I should have never let it out. As an artist, your list was golden, because that's where your collectors were. That's the people who would show up at your events, that would support you, your people who lift you up. Those are the people on your list. But with Facebook and like Instagram and all these other platforms, you have to pay to pretty much have your content been seen. Have you seen anything in your own fields, though, where you might have hope beyond the Facebook and beyond? I know I sound like my dad when I say it. He used to say Spacebook, but I'll just say.
It was the in front of it, the
Facebook. Yeah, I know. Thank you for calling me in on that one.
All jokes.
Jump in on this, though, because you know what I mean? It's like, it is a barrier that is there. So have you seen anybody, I guess, I would ask you, Victor, because I think hip-hop always has this from the streets connotation. It's a badge of honor, but it's also the reality sometimes, too. So have you seen anything that has emerged in your own world that breaks through this kind of, this paywall that we have to often work with?
So just being in hip-hop, and, you know, I'm a vinyl junkie, right? I'm a vinyl connoisseur, a collector. I've never bought into the whole streaming and downloading thing, right? For me, it was always like, no, I'm going to buy the record. If they don't make a record, I'm just not going to have it, right? Or I would buy the cassette, you know, but I'm just not going to have it. I just refused to kind of buy into that for a long time. I'm still there, right? So I still think that the best way for artists and creators is to control your own narrative, right? You know, so even as I'm launching a new record label coming up, I'm not gonna sell my music, or at least I'm not going to push my audience towards Apple or Tidal or Spotify. I'm gonna push them towards my own platform, right? And try to create my own hub, my own world there for people to enjoy my art. I think that that's the direction in which we need to be going to. You know, people that enjoy art want to enjoy art, and it's more to it. It's than just, listening to music, watching a film. It's got to be more of an interactive thing when they enjoy the artist or the creator that's bringing them into their worlds. They want to be brought into your world. So I haven't seen the perfection of that, but I've seen some hints of it, artists that, once again, in the music realm, artists that use Bandcamp as opposed to Apple. Like, they seem to build up more of a following, creates more of a home base for their audience. People like Ryan Leslie, he created this, it was a while ago. It's kind of, what was it, Superphone, right? He created, I don't know if you ever heard of that, but just ways to be able to touch your fans one-on-one, more personal. That's the way we got to go back to, because I'm from the mom and pop era where, you could literally call up, 5,000 record stores around the country and, talk to them about ordering your product, right? And they will order your product, you can sell it to them. We've got to get back to that, to being more personal with the world, with everybody, with our customer base, with people who are purchasing from us, selling to us. We got to gain more control, work on ways to gain more control. But I haven't seen anybody perfect that yet in this new modern era.
And it might be a little new. I think you hit on something really important, and that is, for a lot of us of a certain generation, I will say, the analog aspects is such a big part of our formation years, but we recognize as we get older, there is a generation that is either discovering it now or will discover it, I think, over time. But again, if there is not that activity happening in the culture, then no one knows about it. No one knows to participate or be a part of it. And again, speaking from the media lens, music is a form of media production. It's a way of presenting one's voice and perspective. And hip hop is definitely, it's almost like a foundational point, I would say. You were going to say?
Yeah, my experience has been a little bit different, I think, because I come from the hard news background and I kind of grew up in commercial media and now working in the public media sector, whereas I think, Victor, you have creative cinematic arts background. It's going to be different. And I've been, I think, both fortunate and unfortunate in some ways to always have a company backing me. I've never needed to necessarily put my work on display because I've always had a whole station to do that for me. It's just as quick as sharing on Facebook. And I don't really think that I have much to say. I agree with everything Victor said about just the different platforms right now and how there's not really a perfected way to kind of battle that paywall. But what has been really cool is seeing, I guess, just the array of tools that young people have at their disposal to create content if they don't currently work in the market, or they don't currently get a paycheck for doing that. There's Switcher Studios, there's a myriad of free editing software that people can use now, and they can use that to pitch to organizations and to be able to freelance. And that's something that I don't think we've seen in the past 10 years. So it's been great because this is an incredibly difficult industry to get into. I think the access barrier is huge, which maybe I'm jumping ahead on.
No, you're good, because access is often based upon where we are with our budgets in media, and we know that we've framed this by saying that we are facing a collapse of certain industries. We've lost at a rapid rate a lot of our local news. The earlier session today, which I was not able to be a part of, but know it so well from watching it all evaporate around us. We have lost so much of the reporting that used to happen in our communities that made people feel connected. Now people are, with all the connectivity we have, I feel like we're more in the dark than ever. Maybe we should go to representation here for a second as a topic. How do you think representation of marginalized communities in the press has evolved over time? And are there any milestones that stick out to you? Because again, none of us get here. A lot of us will plow through, but we might have somebody we saw on the horizon that might have given us a little bit of a hope. I think back to me, one of mine is an early queer author called Randy Schiltz, who wrote an impressive book called And the Band Played On, which looked at how AIDS reporting was not happening in the media, but he was also reporting as a journalist and writing this book about what was happening within the community it was happening to. So you have this narrative of like nothing that's happening, but where the community is being impacted. He's a great example to me of somebody whose voice inspired me and let me know that as a queer person, there might be space for me in media as well. Because again, coming out of the 1980s, which is my kind of step into adulthood here, it was, especially in this community, look who I'm talking to here. You know, it's a long game you're playing here. And you wait and you wait and you wait. And I think we're kind of in one of these moments, but all of you must have something you look to that is a milestone that makes you feel like, okay, they did it, now I can do it too.
Man, I think that in music, certainly, what we're doing with MiFi, not a lot of examples of it. There's a company called Array out in LA that's led by Ava DuVernay that's similar to what we're doing, but there's not a lot of examples of creating spaces for, Black and brown individuals to have the opportunity to have access to high-class equipment, world-class equipment, training, and then opportunities to work on films at a high level and different videography projects at a high level, actually working to create economic employment base for Black and brown people. So we're doing something a little bit different than, like I said, than I've heard of out there. Just it's just something that we saw as an opportunity. Somebody that loves Grand Rapids. I hate it when people always feel like they have to leave. I understand it, but I hate it, right? That's the case, that people feel like they have to leave Grand Rapids in order to make a good living doing what it is that they love to do. In a city like Grand Rapids that provides plenty of opportunities for primarily white males, but white females as well, to make a living in the world of media, film, and video. They're not leaving, so why should we have to, right? There's plenty of money here for everybody. There's not enough, there's too much work for the people that are here to do it all. Why isn't that cash flow being shared with the Black and brown community? That's our challenge, and that's our push, is to, get those companies who have these millions of dollars in budgets, right, to create media and PSAs every year, annual budgets. Why is it that you're not hiring Black and brown people to do this work? When we were starting MiFi, we did, a small survey of some of the larger companies in West Michigan, and we asked them, do you have anybody, Black and brown people on your staff? And 97% of them said no. 3 of them said yes. And we asked them who, and it was all the same, one person, one company, right? Kudos for them, but why? What's the problem? Why aren't you hiring more? Why aren't you working with more people? And, they had hurdles. We don't know where to find them. They're not trained properly. They don't have the best equipment. So at MiFi, our role is to get rid of those hurdles. So now we have Grand Rapids Media Initiative Film Incubator here that's training young Black and brown people to work at high quality in the world of film and media, right? They have top-of-the-line equipment available to them at all times, right? And then we're training them twice a week at least. We have professionals coming into our space or zooming in from around the world, working with our young people, and they're involved in all aspects, most aspects of our productions that take place. So they're getting trained on the spot. And our mission is, when we're working on this film, A City Within a City. And our mission from the beginning was to create a set full of black and brown people, right? But we saw that was a tougher thing to pull off than we'd imagined. So as we began to look for people who could work at the level in which we wanted them to work at, we've literally found one black female in the entire state of Michigan. That's insane. Like, there's got to be some people around Grand Rapids that, have the desire to learn and that want to work at the professional level that we're looking for. So we want to find those people and train them. But it was a fight where we literally had to pull people from around the country in order to get the team together that we needed to do the work, And so we want to, over the course of next 5 years, really work to create an economic base of black and brown people here in Grand Rapids that can work at the level that we need them to right here in the city, so we don't have to go outside we don't have to visit Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, LA, to get workers.
Well, we can also export workers too, which is something we often don't talk about. And I'll say from the creative community, I think it's important that we have people trained, as you said, at that level they need to be to enter into a system that we know that there is kind of a bar that people will put out there. But most importantly, that, we understand that in this market alone, sometimes it's not enough. And that if we can export talent, that's also something of value for the culture of Grand Rapids overall, because it changes the narrative as we're changing people's lives. You were going to say something, Kylie.
I was, and mine was an answer to, I think the first kind of question when you talk about the change in the media landscape, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, I really don't. But when you ask for milestones, it's really difficult for me to kind of think of one, because I think when you look at how reporting has evolved over the years, George Byard with the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives, a wealth of information. Check them out. Check the museum out. I did an interview with him, and he was talking to me about how initial reporting, on protests and riots would almost exclusively blame Black community members. And I think there was a piece written called Anatomy of a Riot that looked to place blame. Blame was placed on Black community members, and they didn't talk to one single African American person, but yet published that entire article. So I think when we look at where things have moved, you see Black Lives Matter with the Trayvon Martin case and the reporting done there. It's a little bit better than what we saw, decades and decades ago, but there are still people, I think just having a media circus about Colin Kaepernick, taking a knee. And I think when we look at 2020 and kind of that resurgence, and you look at media coverage, it gets better and better, but it seems like it does feel like it is the bare minimum. I don't think that we're really, breaking any barriers right now that are going to be, I think, something that will last forever in the future.
I'm glad you brought up that idea about when the media does a story and who is not talked to. I think what also needs to be explored in that is something I think in our magazine that we've discovered is that right from the start, communities often where media trucks show up, they're not there to get the slice of life story from y'all. They come in to report if it bleeds, it leads kind of stuff. So the only time their neighborhood is ever engaged with media often, and again, I'm going to be very careful because I recognize news, is something that has become very editorialized, but in an era that I came out of, news was for a long time before the 24-hour cycle became an issue and really emerges after the Iraq War in '92 when we all sat up all night. And again, some people I know may not have been born then, but for those of us who had apartments down the road here like me, we sat up and watched CNN broadcast live, and it really is credited to giving birth to Americans needing to be glued to their TV, and that gave the launch to it. But at the same time, the thing is the trust within the communities. If you only show up to talk to Black and brown people when something bad has happened about their neighborhood, then that becomes the dominant narrative, And they don't want to participate in that because often there are things, and this is one of the things I love about our company, is that we practice solutions journalism, which doesn't take away from the news. We're just going to maybe show up a couple years down the road and say, how did that all play out for y'all here? And let's talk about what's going on really in the community here. And that allows those voices to rise from a place of trust, spending time with them, hearing the things that are positive that are happening in the community that nobody is coming out and talking to. So I do think one of the things we should talk about is how do we gain trust within populations who have been historically underrepresented in media at a time when it's so crucial their voices are welcome and heard.
I think you hit it on the head a bit earlier when you said, our news trucks are only pulling up when there are shootouts and standoffs. I think we need to be present for all of the celebrations that are also happening in the community. I'm not saying don't tell impactful. I mean, if a gunman's on the loose, we got to let you know. I think safety is important there. But we need to be there for all of the yays and the celebrations as well. And there are those stories that are happening. I think very commonly in newsrooms, you'll say, oh, well, we didn't hear about it. Okay, well, why didn't we hear about it? Are we actively going into communities that we're covering? And I think a lot of the time, and I'm tangenting a little bit here, so I'm sorry, but I think, especially in communities of color, I think news organizations and journalists have that one person that they go to anytime there's a Black story or an Asian story.
We call them the STPs in my world. Same 10 people, and you all know who they are. And I'll admit, I may have been one of them at one time, and I've really tried to pass the mic more and more in my life, and I hope, like Victor, I think you felt it at times, I love working with Victor, but I think it's so important, again, that we do not focus on the same voices all the time, too, because there's a sense of eye-rolling that can happen, too, in media, that you become a token, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So the minute you said that, we joke in my house that, like you said, it's the same 10 people. Oh, them again. It seems like it almost seems like they sometimes go out of their way to find the worst representatives from a certain community. It's like, really? Like, you couldn't have picked anyone better? Like, it's like, so yeah, that's crazy, man. But absolutely. Growing up in this neighborhood, you said 90s, you lived down the block, grew up here, I'm programmed to never trust media, right? So when those news trucks show up, news people and police, we got nothing to say, right? Don't want to talk to you about nothing because chances are it's going to work out in a bad situation for myself. It's not going to come out looking good. So yeah, that's, but I do agree with you. The more and more those people come around and make themselves available to tell the good stories that are, always taking place in those communities, then, you can break some of those walls down and begin to gain people's trust, when you show some of the brighter, fun things that are taking place in the community, some of their successes and not always the losses.
I also think there's nothing wrong with asking, did you feel accurately portrayed in this story? I think as journalists we're taught, no, you can't show bias, you just have to look straight forward, ask the question, don't nod, don't do anything. And yes, you do have to be a balanced reporter, but if you're covering a topic that you are not immediately familiar about, general assignment reporters, you cover everything from politics to race to religion, and you're not gonna be an expert at everything. I think that it's absolutely okay to go to community members after the story's aired or, during your interview and say, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to say? Or what, if you could tell me one thing that you really hope people take from this, what is it? And it's kind of scary as a reporter. I've been there where last year I did a piece with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I sent it to them afterwards, and I was a little bit nervous. And I said, I want your honest and true opinions. And part of me, I wanted to be blissfully ignorant so badly, because I'm telling myself I did a good job. But it spurred a really great conversation. We were able to meet, and they said, I'm so, for the most part, happy with the work. There were times where I felt like, our successes weren't talked about enough in comparison to the issues, which was the topic. And we had a collaborative discussion. And I think that was something that helped both of us grow trust in each other. I would do a story with them again, and I'd like to think they would do the same with me.
So is this a formalized thing that happens, and we're speaking about WGVU, right? So within WGVU, is it formalized already that after you do a story, everybody gets a follow-up survey that you've covered, or is that's something you did personally because you wanted to build trust within your sources to make sure? And again, this is the whole thing about journalists, is that we are often the people who have to take what you say, but we also have to take concepts and transpose them for a wider audience. So it's not always an easy job. There's nuance here that we have to work with. So I just was curious about that because I know MLive used to do that. If they did a story on you, somebody would send you an, whether you got, back in the day, you get a letter. Imagine that, getting a survey in the mail. But you get a letter, and you would fill it out. And a lot of it was about the accuracy was one of the questions. Did you feel like you were accurately portrayed in that? But I just don't know if I'm seeing that, especially I don't know if we're seeing it with all the reductions in media right now, if that is still a thing. But speaking directly to where you are, that is a valuable tool, correct?
Yeah, we don't do it. We don't do surveys. I think it's on journalists to kind of share stories most of the time because we live in a digital age. Your subject will say, can you email me the link? They're not watching it or listening to it live. So I think right now it's on the reporters to do that and kind of build that trust, but I think it's a great idea to have surveys. That's something that I could see news stations really implementing and learning a lot from.
So in the arena of attracting people to come be a part of a media platform or whatever, like in recruiting, let's say, I know how recruiting works. It's hard work. It's showing up and presenting and presenting and presenting. We just went through it with our Voices of Youth. We presented over 100 students that were spread all over, coming from all over Kent County. But again, same thing for, I'm sure with you, with your program is, but you want that representation there. So, and again, I'm assuming that for you, you've got a pretty wide area you can draw from as far as like on a spectrum of race, maybe, that can walk through the door with what you're doing, Victor, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. But, to be honest, like, we really don't recruit. From the beginning, when we were discussing this idea, it was the most important thing for us was to create a culture in our space, right? And we discussed, how do we do that? How do we make this space feel like home? How do we make this space feel comfortable enough that, young people want to come here, they want to hang out, and they enjoy one another. They enjoy the people that are here. And so the way that we do that is we allow them to recruit. Bring in your friends, bring in like minds, right? Because we just don't want, honestly, we don't want anybody. Everybody is not going to fit. It's more important for us to have people that can be collaborative and that can work together, right? And that's what's gonna, because we don't have a major budget to get people to hang around or, influence them to hang around. But it really has to be, more of culture-driven and, like minds coming together to create the space. So that's what we're doing at MiFi.
So it sounds a lot like a collective to me, which I like that. As you explain it, it becomes more clear to me and I understand because, artist collectives are ways that you can kind of bring in the pieces and parts you need and then you work together. You labor together, but you're learning together. But most of all, you're doing it together as a group, and you're elevating each other. But within traditional media, I will say this, that first off, I want to give major kudos. If you watch the news, and again, diversity, the best place you can always see it is on TV because it's right there. When you just have a byline, it's very hard to see any kind of distinctions. But I do think if you look at our local news, there has been, I think, a lot of intentionality leading to hires that really indicate that the community is recognizing it. I think, the dirty little secret, unfortunately, is that as we read the statistics at the beginning, is that we know the pay is low. We're not a major market. Like, say, if you compare prices in Detroit for the same work, Detroit is going to have a much better pay base than here. In fact, I will say any journalist who in this town is starting out in TV, you have so much respect for me because I know how little money you make here to do what you're doing. You could make more money probably working at McDonald's, but they show up at awful hours, like it's 5 or 6 in the morning to start work, and they do it. But we also know that if you are in a group that has been underrepresented historically, we can be also farms to grab people. And so it's a constant battle. We have to constantly be bringing people in. So what are some of the strategies you might have done? And again, I hate to put you on the spot here because you've been in your position for 5 years, but what have you done for others? No, I'm kidding.
No, absolutely. No.
Who have you pulled through? Because that's a big part we're hearing a lot from people. You got to pull people through, and I think Victor's doing it. But I mean, how have you been able to share privilege or share your experience to bring others into the world of journalism?
Yeah, it's so hard because aging is like, how old actually am I? I think, still considered a younger, greener reporter, but definitely have enough years to have some teeth, in the industry. I don't think that I've been able to really take anyone necessarily under my wing who hasn't already been like an intern with us or something like that. But I have been asked to serve on a variety of search committees. And I feel like that is really important to have just a diverse search committee, someone from honestly a marginalized community to stand there and have these candidates come in, because I think you look at experience in different ways. I think you look at answers to questions in different ways. So I think that's been primarily it, and also pushing for more cultural change, I think, within news organizations. My biggest thing, though, is that organizations have to be ready to accept different people coming in, particularly reporters of color. I think what is really difficult is, when you talk about markets, you also talk about contracts. So when you go report somewhere, you likely sign, a 2 to 3 year contract. If you want to leave after that time, you have to stay out of, you can change states, but if you want to stay where you're at, you can't go work for another media company for like 6 months to a year. So a lot of people are forced to move, into other states. And what I don't think people realize is when you're a reporter of color, you can't move anywhere. You really have to do your research. You have to look at how diverse the town is. You have to look at some of the race or hate crimes that they have had in the area. You look at the staff. How diverse is the staff? Do I think that I'm going to feel welcome here? You kind of have to judge a little bit. And, for me, that's been a big part of why I've stayed in Grand Rapids. I think because it's somewhere that my husband and I at least know, and we understand the area a little bit. And I will say, for me, I think it's not as difficult to move around. I'm mixed and I'm white passing for them, in comparison to others. But my husband's Black and Indian. And so when we look at where to move, our places are limited. And so when you do go somewhere and you do make that you take the chance, and then the organization isn't there to support you, especially if you live and are working in an area that a lot of people don't look like you, I think it becomes really dangerous for reporters.
I really like how you answered at the beginning about, sitting in on the hiring practice and listening. I think that was worth me coming out today to hear that for me, because I had never thought about that before, about having that lens at the table, because I guess, and I'll admit, we're not corporate where we are. We're very small. But one of the challenges always has been is, within, traditional media is you have an HR department you go through, and you might meet with the news director, and that's it, and they typically are white, So I love hearing that story because, the obvious one is how can you pull people through, which is, I think, a lot of my experience just through time and working with alternative media pretty much my whole life now, starting off with some of the smaller presses like Gyre Media back in the 90s, which was an arts magazine that Charlie McGrath had founded back in the day. And it was a way for artists to be seen and heard in Grand Rapids at a time we didn't have representation. But then we could also be out there with our identities. Being queer in this magazine was easier because Grand Rapids Magazine or Grand Rapids Press was never going to talk to a queer person. So we had to find those other places. But as you grow older and you embody those things, you're like you said, your skill sets, you bring more with time, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. So I love that within your time here, you have been able to help the process of hiring, which is something I think a lot of us often don't even think about, probably from where we are, that how you could leverage your space that you're inhabiting right now, but to also make space for others to walk through the doors. Looking at the expansion of media, though, how can social media platforms and digital media contribute to improving diversity and representation? And it can be in the press or anything in this case, but there are going to be challenges there. So as we're looking to improving this. And I think you've given us a good example of like sitting there and being on the hiring committees and stuff like that. Are there things that maybe you as you look at the future and the innovations that are yet to come, is there anything that's maybe giving you hope for the progress can continue? And maybe there's something that's missing you would like to see happen in Grand Rapids. I know we used to have groups in media that were either a little more formally or informally, but even just gathering people in media together is something I found to be very powerful over the years. But I don't think let's admit the pandemic happened, and it did flatten a lot of things. And maybe we had Zoom conversations, but that human contact, that analog experience that's so important, I guess, what are you seeing as some things maybe in the future we should be looking at here as a way of expanding media and representation within it?
Yeah, I think this goes, more to like practices in the workplace, like you were saying, but expanding, identities that are represented. Some stations are starting to have advisory boards, and so they'll grab people from the community that they would like to hold them accountable. And I think that is something that is really going to help shape some of the relationships that you see between the community and their news organizations. I will say, though, you run into the problem of the 10 same people. And so I think I'd like to see, people leveraging that power, maybe the people in those positions, to connect with maybe someone who's lesser known in the community, so that we're really able to kind of build off of all of our connections. When it comes to the digital space, I think it is great because it creates so much more access to news and information. It's in a space that we've never seen it before, where you can just log onto your phone and you'll have, bam, the news of the day right there. We run into issues with misinformation. We run into, I think with everything there's issues, but it's really kind of leveled the playing field a bit when it comes to access to information.
Victor, anything you'd like to see as we look a little more future here in our conversation?
I think here in Grand Rapids, like with MiFi Grandstand Pictures, there's a real big push in the media, film media right now to bring film incentives back. So there's a lot of collaboration taking place there, a lot of conversations taking place, meeting of the minds, bringing that community together. I think that's something that's really great, and I think it's something that, I don't know if I haven't heard of anyone doing it, but you have the industry nights,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you can start to have a media industry night where creatives and journalists and people can just kind of come together and meld and get to know one another and build about each other's industries, networking, right? Meeting people and just creating access and pathways to share those stories is something that I think is really helpful. We had a holiday mixer.
It was lovely. I was there. They did a great job.
We had a holiday mixer, and just bringing together, painting this picture of media professionals from all over the city coming together to meet one another. You never met, opportunity to get to meet people and network, and like I said, just creating pathways to share those stories is awesome. And so I think that's something that we can't really get enough of, because so many different professionals doing a lot of different things in the media industry that you never know how connecting with one person can lead to something else, to open doors and create new ways for the community.
Any thoughts on the whole conversation around welcoming and belonging within our spaces, though? That first off, I think, I'll just speak from, a queer lens, is that when you see queer people in media represented in a way that is more positive and affirming, you have a better sense of your own being, especially if it's coming from your own community, acknowledgement. And I would say this is a town that has, for many years, I think, been moving into that direction. I think, going back to, it's hard to imagine it's been 10 years since the launch of Black Lives Matter. And yet it launches over a hashtag and starts a revolution pretty much around the world. Now, it didn't happen overnight, and obviously we have to go through some horrible moments in history to get there. But are there I think maybe going back to this analog thing, are there things that you would like to see us get to as a community? And I think, what I'm getting at here is this idea of we can all get thrown in our silos and throw our identities out there, and they become a way of kind of putting us in a box. But we know that we're more than this. I always go back to the Cambridge Analytica example. While we're all fighting over Republican and Democrat, we've demonized people to the point, which is very scary in society, that we've become so reactive, almost like, and I wish I could have seen the 1 o'clock film today, because I think that really hit on this idea, the brain hacking that has been happening for a long time for all of us, and trying to detangle that. But after this work that we're doing, I want to make sure that we also are able to acknowledge there is progress happening and there is positivity that we can help and give people hope that we're doing. But how can we give them hope in the sense of being real and genuine and bringing us together? Are there things that you would like to see that would start to bring more of I think we still need our spaces, a lot of us, to kind of feel safe and to feel like we can speak candidly and safely sometimes, because it's processing a lot, especially if you've fought a long time to get to the table, or fought a long time just to have an opportunity to report what you do and to be that person. It also comes with a lot of pressure, we know that. But as we look at the future, do you see any I don't want to say intersectionality, because I don't think it's that. I think it's building bridges with each other. Do you see that in our future? Do you see that within our media ways? And I think it's happening. I don't want to make it sound like, do you think we'll ever get there, please? No, I think it's happening, but I think we're all waiting for more of a wave kind of a thing that we've experienced in other times in our lives with other movements and other things that have happened in the culture. Do you see a future where that could happen? With everything going on right now, do you think it's possible?
I'm not. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, being a black male growing up in Grand Rapids, I'm like, the word hope is dead to me, right? So I try not to use it.
Sorry if I brought back the Obama for you. Didn't mean to take us back to hope.
No
way.
Before Obama had nothing to do with this, but. Despite the hope, or hope being dead in my vocabulary, I do see promise, right? Just like I mentioned, the holiday parties, and I'm just an unapologetic person, right? So if everybody comes to the table unapologetic in who they are, that's just what it is. I'm going to accept you for who you are, what it is you do, what you bring to the table, and I have promised that you'll do the same, right? And we can all just be human beings and share what we have to share, work together, get along, and kumbaya, right? But yes, I think absolutely there is promise there. I think we've shown it. Me and Kylie have worked together. Me and Tommy have worked together. We just have to do more of it. Right?
I like that.
I definitely think that there's that exists in Grand Rapids, and it can get bigger and better. We just have to do more of it.
Yeah, I agree. I talked with Victor ahead of time because I'm like, I'm going to tell this story. I hope you're okay with it. He's in a great light in it. But yeah, I think there's promise, like Victor said. I connected with him. I think the first time we ever talked was when I called him like 50 times and said, do you want to start a pipeline program like through MiFi to our station? This could be so fun. And there was so much promise to it. And then once we got in the room with, I think, the management of it all, the whole deal kind of faltered, and it became something that wasn't really going to benefit you at all.
Yeah, it's just, Grand Rapids is conservative, right? I deal with scary people every day, all day. It's crazy. Like, everybody's so afraid, to do whatever, but they're afraid to cross those lines. They're afraid to do anything different. They're afraid to be revolutionary. And so what Kylie's referring to is that pipeline program where we were talking about creating a pipeline for MiFi young folks to work with her in their department at Grand Valley to get some training there. But they wanted to kind of pluck and hire our people instead of allowing our team to just work with them as a team, you know. And so that wasn't going to work for us as a company, and we didn't feel.
Very clearly, and like it shouldn't have.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Sorry, I just wanted to say I agree with you.
Yeah, we just didn't feel like it was the most. We were hoping for something a little bit more, you know, step outside of your normal comfort zone, do something you wouldn't normally do, but something that could be really advantageous for the entire community, you know, for young people coming through our program. And I think they would have found for their program as well, it would have been incredible. But, you know, so we just got to get people to step outside of their comfort zone, step outside of the boundaries of the boxes of the normal everyday business that you do, and think differently. You know, was that Apple? Was that it said think differently? Like,
Yeah.
It's funny you talk about this idea of, you know, creating a pipeline, because, and again, there's many ways you can illustrate a pipeline is one. Obviously, one is like, how do you get people connected to the next gig or the next thing that they need? And I'll admit that within media, I think it's one of those areas I think we really could use some help in. But I think also the advent of programs that are coming through, obviously the program you're doing there, program we're doing with Voices of Youth, but I also say within CMC with the I don't know what the correct word would be used for rebirth of Rapidian coming with some new upgrades. Yes, it's here for Rapidian. You know, and I think for a lot of us, you know, we've been kind of waiting for something to emerge. I'm glad that through the Rapidian and the work that they'll be doing in the future, we're going to be able to replace, I feel, some of the things that we've lost. So I think that's a great way to look at ways that we can recommend people for experiences that have meaning. You know, staying in one lane or one job is not really a reality for a lot of people today. You know, look at your career over time. I mean, your resume alone shows you, you know, I always call it the portfolio lifestyle that we have to live, Victor. You have to kind of put it together a little bit here, a little there,
absolutely,
to make it all work. But I do think, you know, this idea of building or connecting people to the next opportunities is so critically important. You were going to say something, I think, on
No,
that.
I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. And I think the reason I tell that story about Victor and I isn't to, you know, burn bridges or trash talk anyone, but I think it's to show that you have, you know, good intentions. There is a lot of promise, but there's so many barriers still to come. So we have ideas. I think there's so much, you know, hope and promise in that. Maybe not hope, promise. But I think we really need to kind of band together. And like, I know that Victor and I will still work together, and I hope that we're going to be able to push forward and get that pipeline program at some point done.
let's do it.
But yeah, I think we still have to acknowledge just the barriers that have been there, and I think a lot of the time have to do with white management, you know, straight white management, and it's a world that they've built, and we're all living in it.
I always say, Tommy, excuse me.
True.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We have to go beyond intentions and actually do, right? Exactly what we thinking, and we have to be unapologetic in it. Like, we have to go beyond, and it's every step of the way, intentionality every step of the way, right? Because we see too many times people have a great idea, they have good intentions, and they get strayed away. A lot of times out of fear, they grab the low-hanging fruit, whatever comes easiest, as opposed to doing the hard, grinding work, step by step, to see through what it is that your original intent was to do. That's what, you know, we come across that all the time in Grand Rapids. It's like, I'm gonna do the safe thing. Let me grab the lowest hanging fruit and just be safe, count it as a victory, you know, just have something that's kind of show face instead of doing something that's really going to change the landscape of where it is that we live and the work that we do. So I think that that's what it is. Like in the situation that we're talking about, it's like you got people that I get a salary, you know, I got retirement 401k. I'm not trying to rock the boat. Like, yeah, I love what you're doing for your community and all that, but I'm not willing to risk what it is that I have over here for you guys. So I'm just going to stay safe.
But you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Right.
And often you're doing it without any safety net, which is that's the craziest thing. Like, oh, we're so proud of you for standing up. It's like, I ain't got nobody to fall back on. Like,
Right.
I'm moving in with mom after this fails. No, and she's quite loud as she snores. We're at our time here, but I would like to kind of leave us with kind of this kind of speaking more. I know we've been kind of having just a conversation up here, which is what, is kind of like my style. If you hang out with me, you're just going to, my partner gets so crazy about this. He goes, when you start to tell a story, he goes, we don't know where you're going to go. And I go, I'm high context, Virgo, get off my back. So I take you on a journey a lot of times in conversations, and I really wanted that casualness because I want everybody to feel frank. And obviously we did not get to all the questions, but we got to every category today because, with ADHD, it's good to have an outline. But I think it's really important, though, in this moment that we look to the audience and say, what is it we need of the audience out there? And I know a lot of you people out there may be connected to media and producing your own way, and obviously we're all in the same mindset here. So I know I'm speaking in that moment, but maybe I'm speaking to the TV here that I just spit at, I'm sorry. But just to let you know that we have needs as well within the community that we would like to see. And so as you think about the audience out there, what is it maybe your ask of them that you hope they hear from this moment as we're closing out on this topic and everything?
Yeah, my ask is a little difficult because I don't expect anyone who's been part of an underrepresented community where that trust with media has been broken to just inherently trust us again. And I'm not going to ask them to do that.
Well, it's West Michigan Nice waiting for you, though.
Yeah,
they'll
right.
take that.
Right. But I think I would just say, a lot has changed in the media landscape, and there are good reporters out there and good stations out there who really do want to tell those stories. And so if you can find it in your heart to talk to someone, or if you do feel like you want your voice to be heard, do some research and find those journalists, or maybe I hope they'll find you, because I don't want to put it on you to do the research. But yeah, I would just say, please don't give up hope just yet, because we're really trying and we want to make it better for the future.
Victor?
Oh, man. I would say put your money where your mouth is, right? So go to grandstandpictures.com and donate. We are raising funds to complete our first full feature documentary film, A City Within a City. If you want to support Grand Rapids stories, you want to support Black voices, this is a great way to do it. Please go and support our film at grandstandpictures.com and come visit us at MiFi. We're located at 1110 Wealthy. We have a great partnership with Community Media Center. We're very thankful for them being an example of a partner that's willing to step outside of the box and to be revolutionary in the way that they're approaching the work. So thank you to Chris Kocher and everybody at CMC for being willing to step outside the box and be that bold face of change in Grand Rapids.
I love that. Thank you. So for me, my thing is really speaking to an art form in many ways to tell people's stories and to tell them correctly is so important, especially if you sign your name to it, that integrity, I want to see that integrity continue to be a part of our industry. I mean, I know we've fought a lot of four-letter words, fake being one of them, by a president for a very long time that really may not have put my life in jeopardy, but has definitely caused harm within journalists. And I hope that, my wish from the community would be that you continue to look at local media. The believability and trust scores, of local media is so much higher than the national. I mean, there's about a 50-point spread. We're in the high 70s, 74, 75, I think. And they're tracking downward. I think they're right around 20 or below now with believability if you're at the national level. And I think it's because of our ability to show up in communities, to have people recognize our faces. And I hate to reduce it to faces, but because your reputations will follow, I get that. But it is often how people do judge us, let's be honest. And, having come from another community, I know what it's like to be an outsider here. It may not seem like it. I say whiteness might get me in the room, but this queerness make sure I don't get invited back sometimes. Because, when you grow up in Flint, I say the West Michigan NICE, again, another four-letter word, NICE. This four-letter word, nice, that is a part of our culture here was not a part of my DNA. I come from a culture that brought us labor unions who you spoke up. We saw all ships rise. And when I came over here, I saw a very different economy here that I'm still trying to reconcile with and say, do I want to continue to make this my home if it's going to be struggle, struggle, struggle? So my message to the community is, and I know I'm going to use the hope word here, so please forgive me, Victor. But I'm going to go back. I know where you're coming from, but I'm going to say within queer history, you have to go back to Harvey Milk. And for a lot of us who are queer, he famously recorded a message in case he was assassinated, and that's a reality for any voices that rise in this world. And they shoot the good ones, I always say, it seems like. But his message pretty much was, you have to give them hope. But that's part of the audience, too, for us. It's like, you can't just sit there with this information and receive it and just react to it. There's real power in showing up in our communities. There's real power in getting off the path. And a lot of us who operate where we do, Inclusion Reporter, working within teaching youth how to use the tools to communicate, and us just trying the best we can to tell stories about what is happening in our community through a different lens, doesn't always hit the radar of most people, but when they do, we really hope that they are responding in a way that shows them that there is some reason to have hope right now. Because despair can really weigh us down. It can increase to a mental health issue. When I took over the publication, one of the first things I said is I didn't like scrolling into seeing a sea of white faces. Until you're actually at the head of the table, you don't have a lot of power. But when you do have power, it's what you do with it. So my thing to the community would be, we are going to report and bring you a lot of content in the future. I have no doubt of that. But what are you going to do with that information that we give you? How are you going to be a part of the conversation that we've shown up to try to capture one person's voice? How are you going to amplify those voices in the community? And I think that's kind of my request to our community is like, we will show up and do this work as long as they keep paying us to do it. And, it's maybe barely paying us for some of us.
We don't get paid.
Yeah, so, if you see my 1099 at the end of the year, it's not a lot. I always say I'm not getting a second home on this work. I chose the wrong career for that. But I do think, as I look at the audience, I just hope that there will be more hope out there for us, that the work that we contribute through the heavy lifting we have to do, and I hope we revealed a little bit of that today for folks who maybe didn't understand how we all work, but I do hope that the audience recipients will be transformed as much as we have by telling those stories and having that trust, and that it will continue on. So I want to thank you both for being here today, and thank you, CMC, as well as Grand Rapids Public Library Foundation for hosting us today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.